What's up, you guys? Today's animated series review is about a group of Martian motorcycling mice race fighting and protecting their world from an evil alien fish species from complete domination, and I'm talking about the Biker Mice from Mars. Biker Mice from Mars aired in 1993, consisting of 3 seasons with a total of 65 episodes. The story begins with a battle in space until one of the spaceships crash lands within a billboard of a baseball stadium, and to be exact, it appears they've landed in Chicago's Quibbly Field, home of the Chicago Nubs, with the audience giving 0 Fs that an alien species riding motorcycles crash-landed on Earth. When seeing their bikes have been brutally damaged, they stumble upon a garage called Last Chance, where they rescue and befriend a girl named Charlie from a goon. Although being somewhat frightened at first, in mere moments Charlie sees them as harmless rats, as they take extreme offense towards that statement, and correct her by informing her that they're mice. Eventually, all 3 explain their origins by using their antennas by tapping into her mind. Not too long ago, their home planet of Mars was invaded and bought out by an alien fish race called the Plutarkians. This led to a war between the 2 species, as the mice were known as the resistance group called the Freedom Fighters. Unfortunately, most of their race was wiped out. They also briefly share how they look the way they do with their enhanced body features. Seeing how their spaceship has been wrecked, which makes it difficult for them to return back home, since they're now stuck on Earth, they eventually discover one of the leaders of the Plutarkian race named Lawrence Limburger is also there with them, and has plans on stealing all of Chicago's resources to help flourish their planet of Plutarch. So with that said, the Biker Mice's main objective is to capture him, hold him custody, and bring him back to Mars. So within the Biker Mice from Mars, you have Throttle, the leader of the mice who's mostly relaxed and well-grounded, Modo, the one whose eye lights up when angry and known to have a temper with an eye patch and a bionic arm, and VInnie, the one who's mostly hopped up on energy, not afraid of taking risks, and loves thrills. As for the allies, you mostly have one main character named Charlie Davidson, a trustworthy mechanic who provides her loyalty on many occasions, especially when equipping the mice with armor and weapons for their vehicles. And then you have some other minor appearances from very few other human allies like 4x, Jack McCyber, and Hard Rock with Darla. However, when it comes to the mice allies back on Mars, you have Carbine, the leader of the Freedom Fighters and Throttle's love interest, Rimfire, Modo's nephew who aspires in joining the Freedom Fighters, Stoker, the founding member of the Freedom Fighters, Harley, a mechanic/nurse for the Freedom Fighters who happen to be Vinnie's love interest, and Sergeant Skavitz, the leader of the mice military. As for the villains, you have Lawrence Limburger, an obese fish who loves eating worms and reeks of a horrible stench. He also happens to be the owner of Chicago's biggest industrial company, Limburger Plaza, and not to mention, due to his face not being accepted by humans, he often wears a mask to blend in. Carbuncle, the mastermind scientist who creates all sorts of gadgets and gizmos. Greasepit, the dumb yet loyal servant to Limburger who mostly is referred to as a big lummox or giant oaf for his constant disappointment. And Fred the Mutant, a random science test experiment who oddly loves being in pain and enjoys torture. As for the other Plutarkians, you have Lord Camembert, the leader of the Plutarkians, Napoleon Brie, Provolone, Marshall, Latoya, and Dominique T. Stilton. And in regards to other villains, you have a lot of other characters chosen from other planets as hired mercenaries from the transporter to attack the mice, but obviously fail to do so, as majority of these villains only appear once or twice, like the Exterminator, Lectromag, Tunnel Rat, the Loogie Brothers, Evil Eye Weevil, Corroder Cody, Monstrella, Gorgonzola, Weathermeister, Pulverizer, Stonecutter, Jet Blaster, Slobber the Mutt, Catscan, Billy Money, Mudfish, Mardock, Mechanic, Icebreaker, and Deathmaster. And then you have some other randoms like the Pit Crew led by the Pit Boss, the Road Ravens led by Jimmy Mack, the Mafia Zombies, as well as the Verminator and Cycle Centaurs. Throughout the series, the Biker Mice end up establishing base within the scoreboard and quickly adapt to Earth's climate and its regulations by becoming law-abiding citizens when seeing a red light. As for the remainder of the time, the Biker Mice are usually goofing off. For example, not only are they clumsy, but they're usually singing songs, dancing, watching TV, listening to loud rock music, and playing dangerous versions of sports, which happens to cause chaos within Charlie's garage, in which she sleeps in. With all the damages they constantly create, Charlie often stresses out seeing how all of her money goes into repairs, and because of this, in one episode, she even struggles to pay taxes when money gets low. While on the topic of Charlie, earlier in the seasons, the mice are basically pretty sexist and make all sorts of snarky remarks towards her for being a woman, which pisses her off. Despite when aiding the mice on a few missions, whether human or undercover, by trying to prove them wrong that she can handle being a hero, oftentimes they refer to her as Babe and own the shit out of her. Not to mention, whenever the mice see Charlie in a bikini, they lose their shits. However, even though VInnie is sometimes the most pervy out of all three of them when Charlie wears clothes that reveals more skin, both of them often have a semi-love interest but never make it to anything more official, as the concept of a female being banged by an anthropomorphic mouse is just bizarre. Nonetheless, Charlie does play a pivotal role, as she's the one responsible for all the times the mice had battle bike upgrades, gliders, shells, hydrofoil add-ons, and new armor for different occasions. But one thing she doesn't contribute to is their concept of riding bikes, which eliminates the law of gravity, and not to mention, the bikes basically have a mind of their own, so a lot of times they come in handy. When it comes to catchphrases, they usually scream out "it's tail whipping time" when about to get into action, or "we're the baddest mama jamas," and when riding their motorcycles, they yell out "let's rock and ride." However, when entering upon water, they often struggle to come up with the catchphrase, as VInnie accidentally yells out "cowabunga" in reference to the Ninja Turtles. However, anytime after, they continue with the word "cowa" but hesitate to continue the rest. But that's not the only time when the TMNT are referenced. In the first episode, when Limburger was shocked to see the mice on Earth, they followed up with the question, "What, did you expect turtles?" And when watching TV, there's a cartoon show where you see real turtles who talk with miscolored bandanas and yell out the word "cowabungle" to avoid copyrights. And the funny part is, those aren't the only characters the show makes a brief nod to, as we also get plenty of special cameos from characters that are very reminiscent to famous properties, but of course avoid lawsuits with miscoloring, similar catchphrases, or outfits. As for food, like any cartoon of the 90s where animals are half humanoids, you gotta give them a specific type of food to make people know what they enjoy eating, and despite having a distaste for cheese, the biker mice really love their hot dogs and root beer and often eat at Hoagie's Diner. Regardless of all this, throughout the series, the biker mice go through plenty of different adventures and obstacles to stop Limburger from stealing all sorts of resources and transporting it into a giant machine in space, like steel, trees, oil, sand, and water, just to name a few, in order to replenish Plutarch and allow it to become the richest planet in the galaxy. And speaking of the Plutarkians, as for the villains, Limburger is actually one of the many Plutarkians on Earth who just so happens to be the one responsible for obtaining Chicago, as others, seen in different episodes, have other states or cities to conquer, kind of like a mini competition, as the winner gets to run in an election to run against the Lord Camembert for the leader of Plutarch. But in regards to Limburger, he tries to conquer Chicago by all sorts of different machines, but of course never succeeds. So the funny part is, every time he retreats back to the Limburger Plaza, either the biker mice continuously damage it multiple times by barging into the windows in almost every episode, or at the end of every episode the building always gets destroyed, and I mean every episode. By the time the next episode starts, it's fully constructed again. So to make it even funnier, there's one episode where it shows the number count of how many times the building had to be reconstructed, and so far it's stated to be 55 times. This basically explains why Limburger often requests for more payment when heading into financial troubles when Lord Camembert cuts off his funds, and wonders why it's taking too long to occupy the city. Otherwise, Limburger would have been punished in the savage-sucking slimoids by now. But the Limburger Plaza isn't the only thing that needs to be repaired. For some reason, the city of Chicago looks like absolute shit. Their infrastructure is horrible, buildings are broken, and whenever you actually see citizens, they just don't give a shit. I mean, if Limburger had actually destroyed the city first, I'd understand, but his main focus before anything else is to conquer Charlie's garage, which is the ultimate source of domination. On a side note, while on the subject of Limburger, aside from seeking world power for being the greatest leader, whenever he speaks to Lord Camembert via the television, they always have to do this Plutarchian greeting, which is hilarious, as even Limburger hates it himself. They have to summon the lingo while squishing their asses together and doing armpit fartings while saying, "cheek to cheek and stink to stink, as Plutarch grows the galaxy shrinks." It's quite funny, to be honest. Despite this, Limburger also has an academy where he recruits new goons from the Academy of Hard Knocks, where he transforms innocent disturbed civilians into mice-hating thugs with bald haircuts and ponytails, and since they always get their asses kicked and seeing how Limburger never pays them, they eventually go on strike multiple times. As the remainder of the series continues, aside from a lot of filter episodes, and I mean a lot of filter episodes, you have some where they travel to cyberspace, travel back in time to the Middle Ages, get warped inside of a book to relive the life of Shakespeare, or even far enough to fight dinosaurs, but nothing is worse than having flashback episodes. Even though there are some redeeming aspects like saving children of an orphanage to provide a great Christmas, or giving $50,000 to a man to start his own business, there are a few instances where the city is aware of the biker mice when honoring them as heroes, but as time goes on, no one seems to really care afterwards and just accepts all the chaos going on by the mice and Limburger. They know they're mice, but they still have to wear their helmets to blend in. Because of this, we rarely see the cops, and if they appear, they do absolutely nothing. By the end of the series, when the mice are trapped within a cage made of Plutarkian glass steel, a substance that's considered impossible to get out of, used on many occasions, we sporadically get bits and pieces of their life back on Mars. For example, in one episode when they capture Limburger and head back, unaware if they'll return to Earth, we learn that Mars was once a planet filled with guardians and optimism until the Plutarkians stole its life source, causing it to dry up. There are also some instances where Charlie happened to get there as well and somehow was able to breathe on Mars, but let's ignore that. And it isn't until the last 3 episodes where the entire story is shared of their lives before heading on to Earth, and honestly, if the whole show took place on Mars, I would have enjoyed it so much more because anything that took place in Chicago was a waste of potential, boring storylines, and useless scenarios minus the good action. But nonetheless, we get to learn how the city of Brimstone in the Martian desert was invaded by the Plutarkians, with the mice army and freedom fighters doing the best they can to restore what once was. When briefly being successful, during the celebration, Stoker explains how the spineless government of Mars caved into the value of Plutarchian gold gills, which allowed them to sell the planet to them. So during an invasion to save Carbine, the 3 biker mice ended up getting ambushed by a rat race who betrayed the freedom fighters working for the Plutarkians. Not only did they join the opposing forces, a traitor named Deep Pocket also joined in on the alliance. As the episode continues, we get to see Limburger go head-to-head with Dominique for full control of Plutarch and how he recruited Greasepit and the creation of Fred. When the freedom fighters were once again battling it out, an unfortunate situation led to the 3 mice to get heavily injured, thus causing VInnie to lose half of his face, Throttle with his eyes, and Modo with his arm. When being captive, it just so happens to be Carbuncle who was actually using the mice to create bionic super soldiers and was the one who created Modo's arm, which is a conflicting situation that constantly becomes an emotional topic for Modo in previous seasons. However, after successfully escaping thanks to Carbine and Rimfire, Harley ends up helping the guys out by giving VInnie a faceplate and Throttle with his nuke knucks for battle. On top of that, seeing how Throttle is sadly blinded, Stoker gives him his enhanced glasses which helps him see things in clear color, and thanks to this, they successfully become victorious for the time being. With the army now celebrating and joining forces with the freedom fighters, with a sudden twist, Harley ends up getting captured by Mace, aka Deep Pocket, and vanishes until leading back to present day. When Charlie asks if Harley was ever found, Modo responds that they were close many times, but she was never to be seen again. Quite frankly, those last 3 episodes were probably the best of the series or any story involving a flashback of them on Mars. The story of Harley being led on a cliffhanger makes VInnie's relationship with Charlie feel a bit reminiscent, which is somewhat heartbreaking. Not to mention, Throttle's separation with Carbine is another emotional cliffhanger. If only they just stuck with this, the show would have been so much better. This show is a huge miss in potential. I usually give the benefit of the doubt with shows with slow story progression, and hoping it would improve the storyline as you watch further. But within 65 episodes, it barely sheds any depth or character development. Aside from funny one-liners, jokes, and 90s humor, it had so much to offer but failed to portray anything significant, as it feels like any other cartoon trying to bask in on the glory of anthropomorphic humanoid hype. Even though I knew about this show since I was a kid, this was my first time watching it from start to finish and sadly left me to feel disappointed and much more to desire. Although the show contains a lot of action which is good enough to relive the memories through the action figures, it didn't live up to my expectations and was probably an extra season too long. Therefore, Biker Mice from Mars, the animated series, gets a C/C+. Thanks for watching, give a like and subscribe for more animated series reviews and stay tuned for the next episode.